Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Welcome to day 9 of Crucible League spoiler season. Today, we've got a few pieces of information and we're still expecting one, and that is the 2020 gems. The time I'm recording this video, they're not out. Who knows, by the time I've edited it, maybe they will be. But that'll get a separate video when they're out. Now, Bloodnotch is the first thing here, and I love it when there's a unique item that's revealed, and it's so polarizing that basically no one thinks this is mediocre. Everyone thinks either this is really powerful, this will be the center of new builds that are AFKing in the simulacrum, or they think this is a complete and utter pile of garbage. It looks like on the PathOfExile subreddit, it's like 20% of people that are thinking this is phenomenal, and 80% of people think it's trash. I think it's probably actually really strong. It is very niche, but it's already possible to make a build around cast when stun support that's actually fairly powerful in the current game. Cast when stun support is getting massively buffed, especially for hit-based versions of it, but even ignite-based versions, which are the more popular ones in 3.20, will be slightly better in the new patch. So cast when stunned is getting buffed a lot in this league, and Bloodnotch will fit into any build that is taking heavy advantage of cast when stunned. Now this is very much going to be a difficult build to make. Like Ward Loopers, it's going to be the sort of thing that's going to require careful balancing of the amount of energy shield that's on your character, as well as a bunch of other defenses on your character. This is not going to be something that is league start viable, but Bloodnotch is definitely something to keep an eye on. In a lot of ways, I think of this as the Olroth's Resolve of the patch. Olroth's Resolve is not really a flask that people want to use on normal builds at all, but where it's good, it is absolutely build empowering. That's what I think Bloodnotch will end up doing. It will be a very powerful item on builds that are intentionally lowering their stun threshold in order to take advantage of cast when stun support. Second piece of information today is that private leagues are now able to be created for Crucible. Now this doesn't mean you can start playing the Crucible expansion any earlier than everyone else. It just means that you can do all of the background administrative work that's involved in setting up a private league, which mostly involves inviting your friends. So if you're interested in setting up a private league for this expansion, this is the time to start doing that. Otherwise, this news doesn't affect you. Next, we have an extreme example of a Chase Crucible passive skill tree. This is on the unique item Pledge of Hands, which has been moved to Atsuri in recent patches. Now this has something incredibly strong at the end of its Crucible passive skill tree. Ice Spear and Ball Lightning fire projectiles in a circle, and those projectiles return to you. This is definitely going to be an extreme Chase Crucible outcome, and it's something that could be very rare indeed. So don't count on having this, and especially don't count on having it on a specific unique item, but these things will exist throughout the league. Now, if you're playing Ice Spear or Ball Lightning, you probably won't unlock this yourself, but you might unlock a similarly good thing for example, Fire Trap, in which case, that's what trade is for. Of note, this affects Ball Lightning and Ice Spear specifically. GGG confirmed that there will be similar sorts of mechanics for pretty much every skill that you would conceivably use as your primary skill. However, things that are just used as support will probably not receive this. So interpret that to mean skills like Conductivity probably won't have their own deep Crucible passive tree support, but there will be for almost everything else. Finally, we have the recently asked questions update, and this has actually been updated with answers to a lot of questions that I had put in. A lot of these were things I expected to get yes answers to. However, I did want to just put them in because one of the things with PathOfExile is that there's a lot of just complex interactions and a lot of corner cases. So for example, if you have an item that has a Dexterity and Strength Benchcraft on it, or Veiled mod, and you apply an Exalted Orb to it, that prevents you from rolling Dexterity with the Exalted Orb. However, if you have an item that has a Chaos and Lightning Resistance hybrid craft, also from Betrayal, either a Veiled one or a Benchcraft, and you then apply an Exalted Orb to it, that does not prevent you from rolling Lightning Resistance on the item. So there's lots of those sorts of corner cases, and I thought I would ask questions that would clarify a lot of those, but there's a couple of really big pieces of information in here as well. So firstly, can you scout out the entire possible tree of an item just by completing one Crucible encounter, or do you need to do multiple encounters to scout out the item's tree? And the answer is you have to get enough experience to unlock the first node in order to be able to view its entire tree. This could come from one encounter if you're able to handle a difficult one. So this will have a big impact on some of the things people were thinking where they just pick up a whole bunch of different crafting bases that don't have anything special about them already and then just apply the Crucible mechanics to them and scout them out looking for the best starting point. I think that sometimes you might still do that, but this also leans more towards the prospect of using Crucible mergers instead. And there's a bit more about Crucible mergers that'll come up later. Does the rarity, quality, and or mods on a weapon influence its potential Crucible trees? The answer is no. Item level does, but other permanent alterations to the item do not. Does using currency on a weapon with a tree modify the tree in any way? For example, if I Exalt Slam an item, or if I Val Orb a weapon, whether I get a positive or negative result, what's going to happen there? The answer is no, it will not affect the tree in any way. Can corrupted, mirrored, influenced, fractured, synthesized, or enchanted items, or items with abyssal sockets, have or gain a Crucible tree? If they can, would the special mods they have from those mechanics influence the Crucible tree in any way, i.e. would an influenced item have access to passives only available to influenced items? So the answer is that they can have a Crucible tree, but they do not have special passives exclusive to them, and corrupted and mirrored items cannot gain a Crucible tree if they don't already have one. However, corrupted unique items can have trees added to them, but will require you to go through an endgame Crucible encounter to do so. Are there any passives that are only obtainable by merging Crucible trees? The answer is yes. This is going to be a really, really big one if you find one of these, as these are probably going to be some of the most special ones around. This is something akin to what existed in Sentinel League, where there were Recombinator exclusive mods. Are there limitations to merging Crucible trees, i.e. can I merge a War Staff with a Staff? You can merge War Staves with Staves, Scepters with one-handed maces, but not Staves with two-handed maces or Scepters with wands. If I craft cannot roll attack mods on my weapon, will that influence its Crucible tree when I complete its first Crucible encounter? No, it will not. When an Awakener's Orb is applied and the recipient item has a Crucible tree, does the output item keep that tree, or does it do something else? What about when an Awakener's Orb is applied and the recipient item has no Crucible tree? Does the output item also have no tree, or does it take on the tree of the donor item? The recipient item's tree is kept and the destroyed item's tree is lost forever. So just a quick refresher with the Awakener Orb, the first item you click is the donor item, the second item you click is the recipient item, and that is spelled out carefully on the Awakener's Orb, but it's always worth just rechecking it when you use that. Now this one only applies in standard or permanent hardcore. What happens if I recombinate a weapon that has a Crucible passive tree with a weapon that does not have a tree? Is there a possibility the outcome preserves the tree? The answer is that trees are removed when recombinating, and there will be a warning prompt if you try to recombinate an item that has a Crucible tree on it. Now, two other big ones. Will imprinting a weapon before I complete its first Crucible encounter effectively give me another chance to get another tree if I don't like the first tree? Yes, although it is best to imprint before you've added any Crucible tree experience to the item. So this one is really big. If you get a genuinely special base, let's say that you're running a grand heist and you pull out whatever Void Battery's base is nowadays with 15% increased effective caster mods on it. This is a really, really special base. You would then go and scour it, make it magic, and then imprint it. And then you could do your first Crucible encounter, find out what comes up on the weapon. If you end up with something that's fantastic in conjunction with Void Battery, then at that point you might start the horrible process of scour chancing it. And if you end up with something that's rubbish, then you might just go and revert your imprint and try again. Interestingly, the question that I actually asked here was different to this. The question I asked involved imprinting a weapon using a Krakic Chimeral, then merging another item's passive tree onto it. Can you then revert to your imprint if you prefer your old tree? That wasn't answered, and I assume that GGG probably haven't worked that out yet. Can I use a split beast or a fractured fossil on a weapon to create two copies of the weapon with the same tree? The answer here is yes. Now this is going to have a huge economic impact. This is going to mean that split beasts and fractured fossils in Trade League are going to be very expensive this league. Most of the time in a Trade League, it tends to be special bases that are the best uses for split beasts and fractured fossils. They do have other uses as well, so for instance, Split Beast can be used as an alternative to Orbs of Annulment in many situations where you want to preserve some combination of the mods on an item, but you also want to get rid of some others. So Split Beasts do have other uses, but the price of Split Beasts and Fractured Fossils tends to be set by special bases and or some uses in conjunction with maps. Now, what's going to happen here is that those Crucible trees that allow an item to vendor for a Divine Orb, they are probably going to set the price of Split Beasts and Fractured Fossils. There are two ways this could go. Either it ends up that items that have a Crucible passive that allows them to vendor for a Divine Orb will end up being quite a bit rarer than Split Beasts and Fractured Fossils. If that's the case, these items that vendor for a Divine will probably end up being 1.6, 1.7 Divines in trade if they're unsplit, and most people will split them before they go and vendor them. Alternately, it may be that the split beast and fractured fossils end up being the limiting reagent. In that case, those items that vendor for a divine will probably end up being about 1 divine orb, and split beast and fractured fossils will end up being a little bit less than a divine orb, or it may turn out that split beast and fractured fossils end up hugely valuable if it turns out that there are just so many items that people want to duplicate with these mechanics. In any case, these last 2 points about imprints working with Crucible and split beast working with Crucible may direct your Atlas strategy. You might find that Einhar encounters are a bit more lucrative than usual. One thing that's interesting is that there's no comment here on the potential exploits that might exist if there is a passive that reads, this item vendors for an additional Mirror of Kalandra. So hopefully GGG have looked into that and decided, yeah, we're just going to fix that before it becomes a problem. All I need to do really is make it so that mirrored items don't have that ability. Anyways, that's all I've got for now. May your Orbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.